Thank you for joining me in Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe meet to empower you to succeed. This program is brought to you by Right Career Fit. Feeling stuck or uncertain in your career path? Have that very important career conversation with a career professional. Book your appointment today with any of the career professionals interviewed on this program or with me, Hoda, at rightcareerfit.com.
And my role in life and mission is to give people their voice so they can be self-advocating for more what they want in life. Anybody considering interest, be aware that they're just self-reporting what they do and don't like from their own personal limited experiences. And that can change as experiences change. We're going to say, I want to study business or psychology. Who have you talked to? Do you have any work experience? What skills are required? When you talk to people in those occupations, what are the things that they have to naturally do easy? Our needs in our culture are growing, but support for career development is stable at best. We all face chaos and bumps in the roads, and that's why I'm trying to find simple ways to normalize the process, help people understand that, wow, what they're going through is something they can get control over. And with your help as a coach, we can find ways to find new possibilities for them.
Thank you for joining me in Season 2 of Hoda's Career Info, your career program where career professionals from across the globe share career tips and personal stories to help you successfully navigate your career. I am Hoda, your host. I look forward to another season of career chats with international career professionals who will inspire you to take your journey to the next level. My guest today is Dr. Rich Feller. Rich Feller is Professor, Counseling and Career Development Emeritus and one of 12 University Distinguished Teaching Scholars at Colorado State University. He has served as the National Career Development Association President as well. A former school, vocational and admissions counselor and coordinator of graduate programs in counseling and career development and the Students Affairs in Higher Education program, he has also taught within the Organizational Performance and Change Graduate Program. Consultant to NASA, UN, FNL, AARP, Modern Elder Academy, and organizations within all 50 states and on 6 continents, his publications include 3 books, 6 film series, and over 125 articles and book chapters. Rich is the founder of the Who You Are Matters board game and virtual experience and the online storyteller OneLifeTools.com. He recently led the National Science Foundation's Gauzy Career Programs, created a website for those seeking STEM careers, STEMcareer.com, and serves as Chief Advisor to YouScience.com. He is Executive Director of the Career Development Network and lead trainer for the Job and Career Development Coach Program. Rich also co-authored Pearson's Career Development Making System, and he acts as a career consultant to Semester at Sea. His international consultations include projects in Sudan, Thailand, China, Korea, Japan, Australia, Singapore, India, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, Canada, and Europe, pretty much all over the world. Let's build our professional and academic knowledge from Rich Feller's 40 years of experience. Thank you, Dr. Rich Feller, for joining me today on Hoda's Career Info. It's a privilege, and I'm very excited to have this career conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. It's always fun to share ideas with people of mutual concern and interest.
Rich, part of this program is sharing personal definitions of key career terms that we use every day. And I usually challenge my guests to choose one career term. It can be 2 or 3 words, as many words as you want, but a term that reflects the work you do and a definition from your perspective, your experience, not the one that I would Google search.
Sure. My word is democratizer. I come from fewer resources. My parents didn't have a formal education that I was able to access. And my role in life and mission is to give people their voice so they can be self-advocating for more what they want in life. That includes policy, but also just helping people learn tips, tools, and techniques, or even psychotherapy, which I am, to give them voice and help them clear up and navigate their own transitions throughout a lifetime.
I love that. And isn't that the purpose of education when we think about it? It's to get people all, on the same level.
Yeah.
Rich, in a recently published article in the Career Planning and Adult Journal, the title is What Color is Your Parachute and Beyond? You reviewed career work trends and the career development field, mentioning that in a way, it is your history or story constructed after 40 years of work in the career development field and as an educator. Can you tell me a little bit about your story and embedded with it the summary of the message you were trying to send by writing that article?
Be happy to. I come from a family that was in a small town America. Again, my mother had an 8th grade education. My family didn't have the opportunities that I've had. And I've always cared about helping people navigate their life. Many good things happened. I'm old enough to have been in this business a while. I actually studied under Carl Rogers and Albert Ellis as a psychotherapist. I was lucky to be part of Richard Bowles' early training. And if you've seen What Color is Your Parachute, my flower is in there. And I wrote that section, which he found useful to put in every one of his editions. So my story is really about thinking about how do we do life design? How do we get the very best out of everyone? Because the world needs our best. That article really talks about, I think, where Richard Bowles and What Color is Your Parachute took us. And then I believe we have to go beyond that. And that's led to my recent work that deals with narrative assessment through One Life tools, use science. I'm driven by the notion of aptitudes and what that means. I'm author of the career decision-making system with Art O'Shea that's used by 20 million people. And I now see the limitations of interest inventories and exposure bias. I was fortunate to work at NASA headquarters on STEM and maybe introduce some of that language to our gatekeeping community. And then I was involved with AARP in a program called Life Reimagined, which was a remarkably wonderful program to identify and talk about the 47 and above transition in our life, which is about purpose and meaning and finding ways to get digital and face-to-face help of all those people who are looking to navigate the later chapters of their life. I presently now teach for the Modern Elder Academy, which looks at really midlife and how do we navigate that. So my story, I try to write up in that article, which is encouraging people to honor our past, but also look forward to where we're going, which caused me to look back at some of the former literature and see how we've misunderstood it. And frankly, I'm doing my best in my later chapters to try to offer hope and inspiration for people to aspire and find decent work.
You brought the Ball's work, so I'll go right away to that question about, he is famous, for those of you who don't know him, for What Color is Your Parachute? And we all still rely on many of what's written in that book. And for you, with Ball's work in mind, you developed the heroic G mindset. Not a long time ago, I interviewed Mark Franklin, and the president of Career Cycles, and he introduced us to the idea of the heroic G concept. But I would appreciate it if you could tell me about it, and
Sure.
particularly how the heroic G mindset narrative assessment system works, because you kind of mentioned that also in your previous response.
Yeah, Mark Franklin is one of my best teachers and a dear friend and also a business partner. We co-own One Life Tools, which created a game called Who You Are Matters and a virtual rendition of it called Conversations Matter. But I think it really came to me by looking at my own growth and what was missing by only focusing on interest and the downside of that. And I also found that working with older people, they want to tell their story. They have such wonderful interpretation of their experience, which is much more useful than probably trait factor kind of assessments. So I try to look at how can we help everyone tell their story, give voice to their experience, and then from that, we can assess so many wonderful things about them, including helping them look at possibilities. Underneath all that is an assumption that regardless of whether you're 7, 17, or 71, how do we find one concept that may be most useful, knowing the future is not something we can define. We know we're going through bumps in the road. We all have transitions. And we came up with this concept of heroic G mindset. And I can break that down if you'd like me to walk through that. Would that be helpful?
Just what the H stands for really
Sure,
quickly.
yeah.
But for
So
those of you watching, sorry, you can check out my interview with Mark Franklin. He gave us the full detail
Sure.
with a screen share as well.
Yeah. So heroic G is the best concept of, I think, putting together hope, efficacy, the whole notion of resilience, and optimism, which is the word hero, which we learned from a gentleman named Fred Lothan, who really talked about psychological capital. So we think that concept is critical. And then from our game, we try to institute the notion of how do we look at intentional exploration? How do we help people intentionally explore, look for clues that lets them make decisions? And the C stood for this notion of if we can all clarify what it is we're about and what we want and what our story is, and have curiosity, which was the C. And then we added Carol Dweck's wonderful work about growth mindset. So heroic G is hope, efficacy, optimism, hope, efficacy, resilience, optimism, intentional exploration, clarification, and curiosity. And the G is really the growth mindset. We think if someone could learn that mindset, they can navigate any transition, which is underlying all the work that we're doing.
And so can you tell me a little bit about the narrative assessment system? How does it work?
Well, if I were to ask you to tell me a story about yourself, you would be able to give me what your desires are, what the other people impacted you, what are your kind of personal qualities that matter to you, other people who have influenced you, your assets, and the whole notion of natural interest. If you told me those, that would really give me great data from your perspective. And we talk about with that, what possibilities can you see for yourself? And from that, we really have you kind of mold your narrative. We assess your narrative about what possibilities you're looking for. And we do that through a two-step process. One is clarification, and the other is intentional exploration. That's led to, we think, a remarkable program that can be done online called the Online Storyteller. We can do it through our game. We also can do it through our virtual Conversations Matter. All that data then can be entered up in a dashboard that you and your client can share, which really keeps all your records. If you think about how often we take notes from our clients, we don't really use those. We don't capture them. And with our dashboard, you can load that material, which allows you then to go back to that at any time, as well as working virtually, both looking at it with a client and yourself. So this morning we spoke in England about that whole process, and we got a great response. The other day, I did it with a group of principals in Estes Park, Colorado. And I think it gives a new value to people making meaning of their life stories. And to me, that's a very rich form of narrative assessment.
And I love that because I use narrative coaching in my services, part of my services. But then one day on LinkedIn, I see your post about interest inventories. And I'm thinking, this is one of the reasons I reached out to you. I use interest inventories, but I find that it really depends on the client. So sometimes I'm like, yes, I need to do that. So what would affect my decision whether to use interest inventories or not as a seed?
Beautiful. And that's a great question. And I hear a lot of people asking it. What I would argue is this, that interests really ask you what you do and don't like from your past experience. The challenge is some people have an experience that's very narrow. Could be women in clerical occupations, could be people like myself who came from very few resources and didn't get to go to museums or go out on Saturdays. Or it could be you're geographically in an area where there are very little stimulation or opportunities. So if I ask you what you do and you don't like, and it's from a minimal perspective, you're really quietly tracking yourself because we're taking those interest scores and walking to occupational groups. Well, in some ways, I call it a quiet tracking. On the other hand, if you have experiences like this, what you can say you do and don't like is with a much better experience, so you can really respond to those questions that are given to you about what you do and don't like. So I'm not discounting interest inventories. Again, I have one that's used by 20 million people, the critical decision-making system by Pearson. But I came to realize that wasn't enough because it was reinforcing the status quo. And it also suggested to me misguiding people. So while I like that, and even Mark Savickas would say some of the tools that are out there really aren't very useful in terms of prediction, they do explain the world of work pretty nicely in terms of how it's organized. So I would say to anybody considering interest, be aware that they're just self-reporting what they do and don't like from their own personal limited experiences. And that can change as experiences change. That's a critical insight. I remember community colleges would take women in displaced homemakers programs, and they would go out and let them work on all the trades and see other occupations. And their interests would change because, wow, they had experiences they didn't have before. Junior high school tries to get you to have different courses experience to stretch those views a little bit. I'm quite aware that SES, socioeconomic support systems, really impact how much income you have and where you can go on Saturday. Can you get tutoring? Can you go to camps? Do you travel the world? So I think the interests are very malleable, yet useful. I then came to think about that as a result of some people contacting me to create what's called U Science, which really then says, with interest, let's talk about what are your natural competitive advantages, and we call those aptitudes. We've now tested over 2 million users on that particular tool called U Science. It's an online version, which makes it really customer driven and very much interpretive by users. And we know that if you'll spend a little time with that, a stronger dosage of somebody helping you talk through those results, it has great impact. And our data shows tremendous increases in finding talent where we didn't expect to find it. And that's critical when you think about the high demand occupations. If you just use interest, you're going to kind of be revealing what a person told you they liked and disliked. We would argue that plus aptitudes. What are your competitive advantages that you've already performed by using these particular brain games? We can tell you if you can perform now, you can perform in the rest of their life. And we can crosswalk those with occupations that demand those aptitudes. We're not saying we're trying to track you in occupations. We're saying, wouldn't you like more scientific evidence to support your decision-making? So we give you data and feedback on your aptitudes and how they crosswalked occupations. We give you feedback to what interests crosswalked occupations. And then we have an algorithm that merges the two to make solid, sound scientific recommendations for you to further explore. And I've got so many good stories of how that gave people new insight to better navigate their lifetime of transitions, whether it be going to look at a CTE course or choosing high school programs or choosing college majors or thinking about returning back to school. This morning, I was talking to somebody at the University of Boulder who's finding all of these people that never finished their degree. We're now talking about them giving you science so they can get feedback as they choose the majors they might want to look into, because now we can support their returning to school. We've got a lot of work going on with HBCUs about helping colleges figure out how to increase their retention by getting a better match and more support as they go through their entry experience from freshmen on forward. So to me, I'm trying to do a better job of learning from my failures, understanding what works with interest, and discover a whole new way of what if we give people strong aptitude feedback? Can it give them much more personal information as well as scientific information to navigate their decisions that they're facing?
So the value of interest is still there, but I agree with you that the inventory, they're not enough on their own. We need to go beyond that.
I think so. And I'm also being a little bit of advocate here. The challenge is that there's so much free 6-question interest survey systems online. People go take 6 questions and they then crosswalk occupations. I think that's very unfortunate and misguides people. I also find many superintendents of schools and governors tell me, I'm spending all this money on career guidance programs that are compliance, that's required. So let's give them an interest inventory. And that's all they do with it. And with that, they don't really get information about what courses should be offered. We don't have longitudinal data. We don't follow up people very well. So I think the interest-only systems that we have in front of our desks statewide, or the question, tell me what you love to do, which is often the first question, or what's your passion, I think is actually a rather shallow question and can lead people into what I call kind of a quiet tracking system.
The follow-up is important, and I love the story idea, like just asking people to tell a story and go from there to build on their interest.
One of the questions
My,
asked people about their interests is, where's the evidence that investing in that area to go to school, what evidence do you have? Who have you talked to? Where's the demonstration of the skills required to do that? What kind of capacity do you need in terms of aptitudes to succeed in that area? And that's a good question if you only have interest inventories. Make them tell a story. Like right now, the two highest majors in the country are business and psychology. You know, and many times people go to college to delay adolescence and figure out through experience 4 years. That's a pretty elitist, expensive way to explore. So if we're going to say, I want to study business or psychology, who have you talked to? Do you have any work experience? What skills are required? When you talk to people in those occupations, what are the things that they have to naturally do easy? How do they get into flow, as Sink Mahai would say? That's all related to aptitudes.
and I love what you're saying, because I believe that career conversations should start in school. And what you like, we know that a lot of what happens in school is you do these tests and then good luck in figuring out what you want to do next. Some schools are changing that, but majority are still in that you do the assessment and with no follow-up.
Well-intended people doing the best they can. And, you know, if I would say, what do you love to do? You'd love to tell me those stories. I'd want to know, well, do you have the potential to really succeed in those with the right aptitudes? And that would seem to be much more helpful as you think about your very big financial decisions of where you're going to go to school, what you're going to study, what career tech program to take. So it gets back to your first question. You know, what goes your parachute is wonderful. It's a life design. It really included a lot of questions around interest, and it also had a lot of tell stories and inventory your skill sets. I'm trying to say now, with knowing that and using the gifts that we've got from that, where do we go next? And that's where I'm spending my time.
So my next question was going to be about uscience.com. You've already talked about it. What are you hoping the audience will benefit from it?
It's now had 2 million users, so we're growing rapidly, and we're just continuing every day to service more populations. So I think UScience is really saying, can we give you, and these are my words, not the company's words, almost work samples. And if I could give you a work sample and you can demonstrate and perform and do it well, you'll always be able to do that work sample well. Well, a work sample is really measuring the speed and quickness of your ability to do a task. So for example, in my case, I have extremely nice aptitudes in idea generation. I can usually answer any question. I can come up with a response. That's very critical if I'm going to be a teacher, professor, or politician, for example, or a salesperson. My wife or my son is a better example. He has extremely great aptitudes in sequential reasoning and numerical reasoning. He's a data scientist. He's 31 years old and helps him do the trades for the New York Knicks and the National Basketball Association. He didn't know this, but when he got that feedback, wow, Dad, I really do think in sequence and my reasoning is really there. He can't really get better at that. It's how he has it in his brain. It's a competitive advantage he has. So when we could find occupations that required those, that was a natural fit for him. And when you have a natural fit that combine your aptitudes in your job or close fit, you don't have to fool anybody because you're always showing up with those aptitudes required. Or if you go to an occupation that doesn't require them, you're going to be bored and disinterested and you'll feel discounted. So I recommend that people think about aptitudes as a glove. You really have a glove. You have one and I have one. And we're trying to find out which occupations really are a good fit because they require the same aptitudes. And the closer we can get to that, wouldn't that be nice to know as you then include your interest and your values to make those very big life and financial decisions?
That sounds like an amazing tool to complete the, going past the narrative assessment.
Yeah. I'm just overwhelmed by the response of consumers because they said, how did you know that about me? How do you come up with this feedback? Like you read my mind. Well, in a way, we're trying to read how your brain works. How does it do something quickly and easily? And then we combine what occupations and what majors will require that kind of thinking. It's really talking about how do you learn, how do you work, and how do you deal with the relationships? Because we give feedback about relationships and as well. Yesterday, I had a call from a woman who's a high-tech executive, and she's working on a community board for an inner city issue. And she says, my God, I never thought about this, because I kept asking them, well, what do you like to do? Well, if you have limited experiences, you get tracked into the same occupations that are often connected to the role models you see. And in the social welfare system, you see pretty similar role models, or maybe what my mom or grandmother did, since many fathers are not home in many families across the world today. And she goes, wow, this really gives me new ways to inspire young people to say, look at the gifts you have. Now, how do we take those and honor them, affirm them, and then connect them to opportunities? Youth Science has not one negative word in it. We've used language that is all affirmative. We have no percentages. We don't want to tell somebody, it doesn't help them if they know they're a this or a that. We only want to let them know what are their major competitive advantages and how can we connect them to ways that they learn that will cause them to succeed and find occupations, as well as majors and opportunities to be better in learning, work, and relationships.
And what age would it be? Like, I work with 14 to 25-year-olds. So
great question. So the question then becomes, when is the brain becoming pretty capacitized and full? And we say about 14. So we don't give this to anyone under 14 because that isn't helpful. But the demand was so high in some states, we actually developed a younger version where we don't make recommendations to occupations. We recommend to exploring career clusters. We've had states come to us and say, it's too late to give it to a junior in high school. Give us something for middle school. So we backtracked and said, let's find something that's not dealing with prediction. It's just saying, here's a recommendation to explore related to the career clusters, and fewer tests or assessments to get to that information. Many districts, for example, give it an 8th grade and 11th grade, and then they go to college and they can transfer their data to their colleges and maybe take it again, because your interests will change over time. And that's why we let a person take the interest portion anytime within 10 years. They can take it as many times as they want and then apply it to those things that are fairly stable, which we call our aptitudes.
Well, it's good to know that it's available for younger people, but yeah, 14, I believe as well, is a good time to get talking about careers and move beyond that. My last question is it meant for big organizations to buy, or how do you get involved in
Great question. Science? So we often we're struck by how many independent educational consultants or individual coaches there are. So we've really tried to attend to that, and we sell them a block of them at a much cheaper price so they can give them to their clients, do it for homework, bring it in, and then the FaceTime with you and your client is much richer. So many tools, you sit with your client, you interpret it. Well, wouldn't it be better if they went and did it offline? We're able to go around the website and get information, and then you have it ask better questions. The nice thing about it also finishes with something called Describe Me, which is one click on your cell phone, and it'll tell you exactly the words that describe you as you're going to an interview. And that's another feature we offer. So I think that's a way independent people can use it with individual clients, because then they can upsell their service because they're giving a program. We also sell it to licenses for states. We actually have states who have a license. We also have school districts that buy licenses as well. What we're seeing a lot of is career tech programs love it because it allows the young people to make information about career tech programs now with this new kind of aptitude assessment. So I think we're covering the individual person who goes online, a 52-year-old woman who wants to take it, she can go online by herself. You could give it to all your clients at a cheaper rate so you can upsell your services. We can get it to an individual school, to a district, to a state. And that's how we seem to roll it out to make it useful.
And so I live in Canada, and is there any, cultural things that we need to be aware of? Or
good question. We get a lot of customers from Canada, especially because Mark and I do a lot of work in Canada, and even our online storyteller has a question about your Youth Science scores embedded in it. So we've really tried to mutualize those experiences. The cultural question really is, language has cultural interest, of course, but we've tested all over the world, and we're struck by how you're basically performing work samples. And again, that's my word. So if you can do something, then you want to take that and correlate it to occupations. We're actually in conversation with some other countries right now about different languages, which was something we know we could do. It just would take a lot of research and dollars to make that happen. I would say anybody who's listening, or you, if you like a passcode, just send me an email and I'll send you a passcode and you can try it. That's the best evidence. I don't like sales products. I don't like marketing, but if I can help you democratize, again, access to information that we think is wonderful, that looks at aptitudes, that's what we're trying to do. Now, because it's a performance test, it takes a little bit longer, but you can take it in little sections, which is nice. So different than a self-report tool, which takes 10 to 20 minutes. We really want to look at how do you perform in these particular brain games, we call them, and that's critical. I'm driven by this whole notion that our needs in our culture are growing, but support for career development is stable at best. You know, most programs aren't growing tremendously. So I've tried to think about how can I, with the time I left in my life, find tools and interventions that you can use, or a district can use, or a governor can suggest everyone use, that really allows people to get greater impact and greater scale. So one of the ideas I talk about is called the disruptive triangle. We know that we have to reduce the cost of what we do. We've got to reduce the cost. That's the top of the pyramid. We know on the right-hand side, we've got to improve the quality of services, which means we've got to get deeper, have to have more impact in what we do. And on the other side of the triangles, we have to access way more people. That's similar to healthcare. And you typically can't find all three of those, because cost, quality, and access is somewhat related. However, I've got a few principles that I'm arguing can allow us to do all of this in a much better way, if that's helpful. But my work is really called Disrupting the Cost, Quality, Access Triangle, and all the work that we do. And I've written about that a bit. It's actually in that article as well. We have to empower career practitioners with tools and insights and mindsets that allow them to reduce their cost by doing things online, for example, and gamification, other tools, to get deeper and have more impact when they're with face-to-face with a client. We've got to find a way to make access to people so each person in the country, in the world, gets access, not just the people who can pay for private practice.
And I am very excited by your work, Rich, because you do also bring it up to a level where we can justify our work, where there's a lot of doubt whether, career professionals do actually qualify good services. So your everything you're writing is definitely bringing it to another level.
Thank you. I'm trying to do more tips, tools, and techniques that a person can learn quickly and plug in. We have to find a way to reach more people. We have to find the ways coaches differentiate themselves so they can make a living, and they can talk about how do we really increase outcomes, and how do we go to scale a lot better. I mean, that's why I think individual coaches who find the work interesting with One Life tools, they really get a dashboard, they get a support system, they can work online. We can play the game we've played the game with as many as 300 people in one room with one facilitator, because the games are self-directed. And I'm just trying to think, how do we get to greater impact and higher scale?
Absolutely. And thank you for that. These were all the questions I had for you prepared, Rich. Was there anything you wanted to talk about that you hoped I would ask you, but I didn't, or something to wrap up this?
Well, it's such a privilege to be with you, first of all. And I'm glad you found some of this useful. And I would say to all of our listeners and to all of our colleagues who are coaches, I tend to believe, maybe this is helpful. I would say, I call it 3 I's UA, a formula, 3 I's UA. That again, whether I'm 7, 17, or 71, I don't want to feel irrelevant. And I'm working hard not to be relevant. I don't want to feel isolated. As I age and watch people and study hospice and nursing homes, and I watch 7th graders who feel isolated, and nobody wants to feel invisible. So the 3 I's are irrelevancy, invisible, and isolated. If we can remember that, that's what our clients are bringing to us, the 3 I's. The U is that, I want to try to demonstrate something. I hope you like me, but I really can't determine my worth whether you or this presentation goes well. I would much rather be understood. Give me a chance to be understood. And I find most clients want to be understood. And if we use practices that just say, I like you, I like you, I like you, that's not really that helpful. Being liked is an external validation. It's like candy. I take it and it goes away quickly. My goal is to be understood better. And when I come to you as a coach, I know you'd help me feel understood better. That's the goal. And then the A is, we all need to help our clients. We all need to navigate our own lifetime of transitions by saying, what can I anticipate? When we take anticipation away from a client, they lose their hope. They don't have a future. Whether that means anticipating I might have an illness and I just want to see my son born, or I want to see my daughter get married. I want to anticipate. I want to have something out there to look forward to. Or even it's maybe me planning and having as much control of my own death and dying. That's a sense of anticipation. So I think clients are looking for, please help me see possibilities. Let me anticipate there's a better future out there for me that I can shape and control. So 3I's UA is my formula as I approach most clients with how do I understand what they're going through? Because I don't find that my clients or you or I are that different. We share much more in common than differences, but we all face chaos and bumps in the roads. And that's why I'm trying to find simple ways to normalize the process, help people understand that, wow, what they're going through is something they can get control over. And with your help as a coach, we can find ways to find new possibilities for them.
Thank you so much, Rich. This is very good advice. It's something to keep in mind for me as I work with clients as well. Thank you for your time, Rich.
It's a pleasure. And thank you for what you're doing. The more we can help, again, you're helping access, you're getting information to more people. We can drive that cost down, and the quality of what we provide is our goal. Coaches have such a major role in democratizing access. And I so appreciate the work you do. And thank you very much for your interest.
You have been listening to Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the world join me to empower you to succeed. Thank you for joining me and Dr. Rich Feller in this episode of Hoda's Career Info 2022. I hope the tips shared by Rich help you move forward. You can connect with Rich Feller on LinkedIn. Please remember that you can listen to Hoda's Career Info since it's also dropped as a podcast, or you can feel free to watch it on the YouTube channel. To let me know if you are interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media for more career info. I am your host, Hoda. Until next time, stay inspired and keep moving in productive ways.